Fritz the Cat is an X-rated animated movie from 1972, set in New York during the 1960s about an anthropomorphic stoner feline called Fritz as he tries to get laid and find his way into the cultural revolutions of the era. It doesn't really matter to him which, he'll just take any. He's not really that into any cause beyond what gets him attention in the moment, and he'll soon be back to just getting stoned and chasing tail after causing as much trouble as he can. The story's broken down into 3 sections where Fritz ends up in a situation with new characters that he commits a felony with. After an orgy goes terribly for Fritz, he accidentally burns down his college dorms while on a self-absorbed rant about how self-absorbed college students are as they try to out-intellectual all the other fucking intellectuals. He starts a riot that ends in a whole area being carpet bombed by the National Guard after he spent just a couple hours in Harlem with the black community because he assumes that as a writer and a poet, he understands them and they need him to incite them into an uprising, and he even commits domestic terrorism with a gang of heroin-addicted, domestically abusive neo-Nazis. Though he does change his mind on that one at the last second when it's already a little bit too late and he's already done the job.
Well, fuck it, I ain't doing it. So long, Fritz.
Our main character is clearly a real flawed piece of trash that would do anything to get his kicks, but is somehow still charming, lovable, and dare I say relatable in his overall ineptitude and well-meaning but misguided ways. The vocal performance by Skip Hinnant of the Electric Company definitely goes a long way to help the charm of this character. Directed by Ralph Bakshi, who had spent some time animating for shows like Mighty Mouse and Deputy Dog before moving up to directing and writing for shows like Spider-Man and New Adventures of Mighty Mouse. Fritz was his first feature-length film, and despite not wanting to do more animal characters, he went all out on this movie, wanting to deliver the first adult animation, and boy did he do that by featuring a ridiculous amount of drug use, nudity, sex, swearing, and violence. But Bakshi's creativity and passion is fully on show, so while despite having some genuinely disgusting subject matter and imagery at times, it's animated beautifully for the most part with some real abstract stuff that fits the trippy nature and grim setting. A very large amount of the audio was recorded out on the street on a tape recorder, with Bakshi paying people to drink and talk with him. This causes the movie to feel real and alive even though it's about cartoon animals. The opening scene has a conversation between construction workers on lunch break, just like the classic photo, having a real conversation as one relieves himself over the side while the credits, jazz, and the conversation continues before the spray lands on a pedestrian on the street below, telling us exactly the kind of movie that we're in for. It gives you a really early opportunity to figure out if it's the kind of thing for you. There's a scene in a Harlem bar where again, Bakshi was just hanging out with the locals of the area and shooting the shit with them. Another in a synagogue where he recorded his father and uncles reading from the Torah in Hebrew and discussing it, making it a time capsule of not just the 60s, but the real and varied people of the city in the 70s, some or all of whom won't even be alive anymore. The kind of thing you get from a Spike Lee joint or Steve McQueen movie was being done in a real experimental way back in the 70s. Movies about real things and real people, but here in animation, and it paved the way for all adult animation to come in the future. The likes of South Park, Family Guy, and American Dad. Even The Simpsons, which was considered edgy for TV back when it was first airing, wouldn't have been anywhere close to acceptable for TVs without Bakshi making this movie as avant-garde and abrasive as he did, and audiences must have been thirsty for it because the movie did well enough to launch his film career, with him going on to make other pretty good animated movies like Heavy Traffic, Wizards, The Lord of the Rings, no, not that one, American Pop, and yeah, I'm not gonna say that one. He also made Cool World, but they can't all be good, I guess. Bakshi seems to have a pretty bleak worldview which is on display in most of his movies and gets a real start with Fritz. The New York City background is a bleak, towering black and grey presence full of trash. Central Park is a ditch of destroyed cars with no trees or grass in sight. People are making shows of how progressive they are to try and get laid. The police force is invasive, unprofessional and violent. A synagogue full of Jewish men celebrates a news report of more arms being sent to Israel. There's mob justice, rampant crime, sex, drug use and violence, and a sudden out-of-nowhere moment of every kind of assault imaginable done to a character. It would be easy to take it all as surface-level, edgy shock tactics with a sole purpose of offending everyone possible if it wasn't also handled so artfully. But the movie is also showing us things that just haven't changed. The things people were fighting against and for back then are still very much in our lives. Fritz changes nothing, the left changes nothing, the right changes nothing. But despite Bakshi being an auteur, you can't talk about Fritz the Cat without talking about R.Crumbs. He's not just an underground comic writer, he's the underground comic writer. With comic strips like Keep on Truckin', a famous phrase credited to Crumb, Mr. Natural and Fritz the Cat, along with many other very edgy, incel-y comic strips, but also some very open and introspective, making his work a genuinely fascinating rabbit hole to disappear into, even if he can be beyond offensive. The 1994 documentary Crumb goes pretty in-depth into not only his life, but the life of some of his family, and you can easily see how he became the way he is. And it becomes pretty clear that he's getting some sort of therapy from his art by getting all of his negative thinking and urges onto the page. He met with Bakshi, gave him some notepads for reference, but didn't sell out his rights. His wife did though for $50K, and boy did he hate the movie when it came out.
The hell was that?
Having read the comics, I genuinely can't see why. There's 3 main Fritz stories adapted into the movie: Fritz the Cat, Fritz Bugs Out, and Fritz the No Good. Fritz the Cat is pretty much the same as the movie. Fritz and some pals are in Central Park playing music, hoping to attract some women, but they're more interested in the black man nearby. In the comic, Fritz manages to get him to leave by telling him someone nearby is selling drugs cheap. The man begs for some money for the drugs and then he leaves. In the movie, the girls try too hard to impress the man but only show their ignorance, which prompts a sassy remark from him before he leaves.
I ain't no jive-ass black nigger, honey. Who do you think I am, Geraldine?
Fritz talks nonsense about how experienced and enlightened he is to attract the girls, and he takes them back to a friend's place for a private room, but it turns into an orgy in the bathroom in which Fritz isn't getting anything other than stoned. All this part is a straight adaptation of what's in the comic, word for word and almost panel by panel. The police bust in to break it up. Fritz, stoned out of his mind, steals a cop's gun, shoots the toilet and splits. That's the end of the comic, but the movie has an extra part of the cops chasing Fritz through a synagogue, which then leads into Bugs Out. The adaptation of Fritz Bugs Out leaves out the first part, in which Fritz once again talks nonsense about being experienced and enlightened to get laid, and goes straight to another scene that is adapted almost word for word, panel by panel, in which Fritz returns to his college dorm and rants about experiencing life being more important to him than schoolwork before accidentally burning the entire dorms down. He then goes into a Harlem bar and befriends a black man named Duke, who ends up stealing a car with Fritz and taking him to a party in which he gets stoned. Hooks up with a woman named Bertha, and halfway through decides he must tell the people about the revolution. In the comic, Fritz is chased away with no casualties. In the movie, he starts a riot and Duke is shot dead in one of its best abstract scenes, where his final slow heartbeats are played over visuals of pool balls bouncing into table pockets. On the run from the cops again, the movie and the comics introduce us to Winston, one of Fritz's on-again, off-again girlfriends that he heads off to Fresco with to start a new life. During the car journey, they both get on each other's nerves. The car breaks down from the engine overheating, / runs out of gas in the movie, but in both versions, Fritz incorrectly diagnoses the issue and belittles Winston, saying she wouldn't understand cars. The stranger they assume to be stupid correctly diagnoses the car problems, and Fritz leaves on his own instead of getting gas / engine oil because he is an asshole. In the comic, he rides a train that takes him back to New York City, but in the movie, they go right into the second half of Fritz the No Good, with Fritz meeting a rabbit, Fuzz in the comics, Blue in the movie, and his horse girlfriend Harriet. And I think it's probably necessary for me to put a trigger warning in for this next section. They take Fritz to meet their gang of left-wing revolutionary terrorists as they plan to destroy their city's power grid. The movie changes the terrorist ideologies to be neo-Nazis, and in a moment that's beyond shocking in the movie, but even worse in the comics, the group beats and rapes Harriet for interrupting their plans. Fritz tries to stop them in the movie, but gets his face burned in return. In the comics though, Fritz instigates the rape, while the rest of the terrorists continue their plans before getting re-involved in Harriet's assault. They then leave to carry out their attack. In the comic, they get pulled over and busted by the police, but in the movie, Fritz, disgusted by Harriet's assault, attempts to comfort her before they leave to plant the bomb. Fritz changes his mind while planting the bomb, but is double-crossed by the terrorists who set the bomb off before Fritz can disarm it or leave.
Far out.
Bakshi wanted him to die here, but Steve Krantz, the producer, wanting to leave the door open for sequels, pushed for another scene of Fritz in the hospital being visited by the 3 women from the start of the movie, and also Harriet for some reason, as Fritz gets to finally have the orgy he wanted to have at the start of the movie, showing that Fritz has learned absolutely nothing and hasn't changed at all. Fritz the Cat as a character and the narrative is pretty much exactly as Crumb wrote him to be. The only real differences between the movie and the comics are, rather than staying as a critique of the free love hippie movement, Bakshi expanded by including critiques of rampant police violence, neo-Nazism, Judaism, and the state of New York City in general, while also making Fritz more or less the same, other than making him less violent and not an actual rapist. Crumb responded to his distaste for the movie with one final Fritz comic, Fritz the Cat Superstar, in which Fritz, now famous from the movie, abuses a woman in his dressing room before being stabbed in the back of the head with an ice pick, killing him and any hopes for another Fritz movie. So The 9 Lives of Fritz the Cat is an R-rated movie from 1974 set in New York in the 70s. Fritz, now married, a father, and being yelled at for doing nothing but get stoned all day, daydreams / astral projects out of his body and wanders around New York meeting locals and reminiscing about some of his previous lives. One in which he sleeps with his friend's sister, who is modelled after a character from the comics, before her father comes home and shoots him with a shotgun. Another one has Fritz being a psychoanalyst for Hitler who tries to rape him in the showers before the Americans come in and Fritz is killed again. Another shows Fritz as an astronaut who takes a lady on board to sleep with, but they accidentally launch the rocket in their excitement and it explodes as it reaches orbit / orgasm. He also meets an Indian guru and Satan for all of 10 seconds, who is revealed to be very camp, and that's pretty much it before Fritz gets kicked out of his house by his wife, which is actually how the comic Fritz the No Good starts. This movie is genuinely absolutely terrible. It's pointless, directionless, and the only thing worthwhile to come out of it is the absolutely dynamite soundtrack by Tom Scott and the LA Express, which hasn't left my head since I saw this movie as a child. Bakshi was not involved this time around, instead being directed by Robert Taylor, who went on to work on TV shows like The Flintstones Kids and Goof Troop. This movie is animated more or less exactly the same, albeit with much less creativity and a lot more focus on toilet humour. It's offensive, unfunny, and worst of all, loses any of the satire of the first movie. The movie flopped and did what Crumb couldn't. It killed the movie career of Fritz the Cat. I love that first movie. It's funny, edgy, relevant still, unfortunately, and creatively animated with scenes like Fritz's dorm room rant, Duke's death, and the way the camera pulls out of Harriet's tear as it reflects 2 crosses on the building she was just assaulted in. The soundtrack is full of great jazz instrumentals by Ed Bogus and some songs from the likes of Billie Holiday and Jim Post, and there's a great scene transition in which a crow clicks his fingers and bounces his head along to Bo Diddley's classic song Bo Diddley as the new scene slowly grows in size. Overall, I can understand people not liking this movie. It is offensive and it is in your face, but it's one that has always stuck with me for all of that abrasiveness, while also making points that are still relevant and for how it paved the way for a whole bunch of animated adult entertainment that followed. We need movies like this to challenge the norm, for better or for worse. Long live Fritz the Cat. From the movie at least, not the comic version. Seriously, fuck that guy.